There are moments in life that don't feel real while they're happening. Like your brain refuses to process them because processing them would break something important. This was one of those moments. My mother-in-law stood at the head of her dining room table, looked around at every face in that room, and said, "All those in favor, raise your hand." Every single hand went up. 8 people, 8 hands, voting on whether I still belonged in my own family. My 8-year-old son was standing in the doorway. He had grass on his knees and a dog at his side, and he was looking at those hands like he was trying to understand a math problem nobody had taught him yet. He walked across that room, tugged my sleeve, and whispered, "Mommy, what are they doing?" I didn't answer him. I couldn't, because if I opened my mouth in that moment, I wasn't going to speak. I was going to scream. So I did the only thing I could do. I stood up, picked up my son, and walked out of that house. What none of those people knew, not one of them, was that I had already been keeping records. Every incident, every date, every word said to my face and behind my back. And what happened the week after that dinner changed everything. Before we get into it, if this is your first time here, welcome to Hidden Karma Stories, the channel where real women tell the truth about what happened when they stopped being quiet. Please like this video, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. Stories like this one need to be heard. Now let's go back to the beginning. My name is Sandra Briggs. I was 35 years old when my husband's family decided I was no longer one of them. 11 months before that dinner, my husband, David, died in a construction accident. A scaffolding platform gave way on a commercial build site outside of Clarksville, Tennessee. He was 40 years old. He was a site supervisor. He checked every bolt. He was careful. He was the kind of man who triple-checked his work and still worried about it on the drive home. The call came at 11:15 on a Tuesday night. I was finishing a double shift at Mercy Regional, charting notes on a 6-year-old in the pediatric ward, when the charge nurse touched my arm and told me my phone had been going off for 15 minutes straight. I took the call in the hallway. The foreman's voice was flat, rehearsed, the kind of flat that tells you the person on the other end has done this before and never gotten better at it. David was gone before the paramedics got there. I remember standing in that hallway and smelling my own hands. Hospital soap and something else I couldn't name. My brain had split into 2 channels, the nurse who had a patient to finish charting, and the wife who had just lost everything. Workers' compensation came through. A life insurance policy covered the mortgage for 14 months. The probate court named me administrator of David's estate, the way these things go for surviving spouses, a procedural formality that felt like being handed someone else's keys. Cold, confusing, strangely important. My son, Tyler, was 7. For the first 3 weeks, he asked me every single morning whether Daddy was coming home. Every morning I said no, because David would have wanted the truth, even the truth that cracked us both in half. The funeral was held at Cornerstone Baptist on a Saturday in March. Ruth, David's mother, stood at the casket in a dark plum dress and said to no one in particular, loud enough for 3 rows to hear, "At least he's with his grandfather now." David's father, Frank, had passed 3 years earlier. Ruth said it like David's death was a reunion, like losing her son was something to find comfort in, like grief was a destination and he'd finally arrived. I swallowed it. I nodded. I filed it in the back of my mind the way you flag an abnormal reading on a patient chart. Noted, watch closely, not a crisis yet. But that was the first moment I understood something important. Ruth wasn't just grieving. She was rewriting the story, and in her version, I was already a footnote. I rebuilt our life the way you rebuild anything after a collapse. Slowly, with your hands, with whatever materials are left. 3 shifts a week at Mercy Regional. Tyler at Riverside Elementary by 8 every morning. 4 hours of sleep if I was lucky. Homework at the kitchen table while something reheated on the stove. Bedtime at 8:30. We were working through Stuart Little 1 chapter a night because David had loved that book, and Tyler liked it when I did the different voices. Then I drove back to the hospital and started again. Our house was a 3-bedroom ranch on Maple Creek Road. It was ours, mine and David's. I mowed the lawn myself. I fixed the bathroom sink using a YouTube video and a wrench I found in the garage. I changed the smoke detector batteries every first of the month because David had always done it, and the idea of forgetting felt like forgetting him. Tyler adjusted the way little kids do, unevenly. Some weeks he drew pictures of our family with David floating above us on a cloud wearing a hard hat and smiling. Other weeks he sat on the porch steps staring at the driveway, waiting for a truck that was never coming back. He asked me once, "Is Grandma Ruth upset with us?" I told him no. I told him she was just hurting. I believed it then. The Briggs family had a monthly Sunday dinner at Ruth's farmhouse, 40 minutes south on Route 12. White siding, big front porch, a dining table that seated 12, an old grandfather clock in the hallway that chimed on the hour like it was keeping count of something nobody wanted counted. I kept going to those dinners for Tyler. He loved running in the backyard where David had played as a kid. He loved Ruth's old retriever, Buster. He loved feeling close to his father in the place his father grew up. I could sit through a few awkward hours for that. 4 months after the funeral, I showed up to Sunday dinner and found that my seat had moved. David's chair, second from the head, right side of the table, sat empty with a cloth napkin folded on the plate like a place setting for a ghost. My chair, which had always been beside his, had been relocated to the far end of the table, between Tyler's booster seat and the wall. Nobody mentioned it. Ruth served pot roast and mashed potatoes and asked Carolyn, David's older sister, whether it might make sense to enroll Tyler in the elementary school closer to the farmhouse next year. "The district scores are better out here," Carolyn said, not looking at me, "and he'd be closer to all of us." I set my fork down. I was thinking of keeping him at Riverside. He knows his teachers. He has friends there. Ruth cut me off with a smile soft as a scalpel. "This is a family matter, Sandra. We'll sort it together." The way you'd redirect a child who'd wandered into the wrong room. Marcus, David's younger brother, 31, a mechanic with engine grease under his nails and a loan he thought nobody knew about, sat across the table nodding along like a man agreeing with a sentence he'd helped write. Carolyn smiled thinly. "Don't worry, we've got Tyler taken care of." I picked up my fork. I finished my dinner. On the drive home, I checked my phone. One missed call from Riverside Elementary. The school's secretary confirming that a Mrs. Briggs had called earlier asking about enrollment procedures for her grandson. Ruth had called Tyler's school without telling me. I sat in my driveway in the dark for a long time. The pattern set in like a slow infection, the kind that looks like nothing for weeks and then shows up everywhere at once. The following Sunday dinner, Ruth had invited 5 women from her church Bible study. She forgot to mention it to me. I walked in wearing jeans and a pullover to find a table full of strangers who already knew my name. "Oh, Sandra," Ruth said brightly, "I wasn't sure you'd make it with your schedule." The church women looked at me the way people look at a case file, interested, sympathetic, forming conclusions. One asked how I was managing on my own. Another asked whether Tyler might benefit from spending summers at the farm. Carolyn began showing up at my house unannounced, just swinging by to take Tyler for ice cream. She'd have him buckled into her car before I'd gotten my shoes on. Once she had him for nearly 4 hours. I called 4 times before she answered. "Relax, Sandra. He's with family." I said, "Carolyn, I need you to tell me where you're taking my son and when he'll be back." She sighed like I'd asked her to fill out paperwork. "You don't really belong here anymore, Sandra. We're just trying to help." That one landed differently than all the small things. "You don't really belong here anymore" isn't help. It's a declaration. I started keeping notes on my phone. Dates, times, direct quotes, names of people present. I didn't have a plan yet. I was a nurse. Documentation was reflex. You chart the vitals, you chart the changes, you chart every symptom in order. If the patient gets worse, you have proof you were watching. The family was getting worse. I was watching. Marcus came by the house on a Saturday morning. Unusual. Marcus avoided me the way people avoid conversations about debts they haven't paid. He knocked twice, sharp, quick, like a man who wanted this over with. Just checking if you need help with David's truck. Been sitting in the driveway a while. I let him in. We stood in the kitchen, me with coffee, him with his hands in his pockets and his eyes drifting toward David's home office like a compass needle, pulled by something he couldn't stop looking at. 10 minutes of nothing conversation then. Have you gone through David's files yet? Bank stuff, financial records, that kind of thing. I watched his face when he said it. 12 years of nursing teaches you to read bodies the way other people read words. His jaw was tight. His right hand came up to rub the back of his neck, a self-soothing gesture I'd seen on patients trying to downplay symptoms. Marcus was scared. Not yet, I said. The insurance company handled most of it. I'll get to the rest. Good, he said, too fast. I mean, no rush, it's just paperwork. He left 10 minutes later. I watched from the kitchen window as his truck pulled halfway down the road and then stopped. I could see him through the windshield, phone to his ear, one hand gripping the steering wheel, talking fast. I didn't know what was in David's files yet, but I knew that look. I'd seen it on family members in waiting rooms when the test results came back and the news wasn't good and they weren't ready. Marcus was afraid of something David had kept. I wrote it down. 3 Sundays later, I walked into Cornerstone Baptist with Tyler's hand in mine. 2 women I'd sat next to in the pews for 7 years looked straight past me. After the service, one of them, Patricia, from the fellowship committee, pulled me aside near the side entrance. Ruth mentioned you've been making things difficult. About Tyler's arrangements. Is everything okay? I kept my voice level. Everything is fine, Patricia, and there are no arrangements. I'm his mother. She nodded uncertainly and walked away. The story had been written without me. Sandra is the problem. Sandra isn't cooperating. Sandra is keeping Tyler from his grieving grandmother. Ruth hadn't needed a microphone. She had something better. A church community, a reputation, and a grief that made everyone lean her direction. In the car, Tyler asked, "Mom, how come Grandma Ruth doesn't look at us the same way anymore?" I gripped the wheel. I told him she was still sad about Daddy. That night after he fell asleep, I opened David's closet. His flannel shirt still hung in order. His work boots were on the floor, one still knotted from the last time he pulled them off. I stood there breathing in the faint smell of sawdust and that cedar soap he used, and I let myself miss him the way you can only do when nobody's watching. The next morning, Pastor Roy called. Warm tone, careful words. I was thinking a family reconciliation session might help everyone move forward together. Did Ruth ask you to call? A beat of silence. I just think open communication. Thank you, Pastor Roy. I think I understand the situation clearly. I hung up. Communication was not the problem. I communicated fine. They simply didn't want to hear it. Ruth called on a Wednesday evening. Her voice was softer than it had been in months. The Christmas voice. The one she used when she wanted something and was willing to be warm to get it. I want the whole family together this Sunday. A real dinner. Bring Tyler, I'll make his favorite. Fried chicken, biscuits, the works. I held the phone and stared at the wall. I called my friend Denise after I hung up. Denise Warren, 43, charge nurse on my floor, the only person I told everything to. Something feels off, I said. She sounded like she was reading lines. Then don't go, Denise said. Tyler already heard me on the phone. He's picking out his shoes. A long pause. Then go, but keep your eyes open and your phone charged. You'll want to write things down after. Sunday afternoon. I buckled Tyler in and drove Route 12 south with the windows cracked. The farmhouse driveway had 5 cars. Ruth's sedan, Carolyn's SUV, Marcus's truck. And 2 I didn't recognize, a silver Buick and a beige Camry, both with church parking stickers on the bumpers. My stomach dropped. More bodies than a family dinner needed. No warning, a controlled setting. This wasn't dinner, this was an audience. Tyler was out of his seatbelt before I cut the engine, sprinting toward the porch where Buster was already barking and spinning. I sat behind the wheel for 30 seconds and typed into my phone notes, Sunday dinner. Ruth insisted on full family attendance. 2 unfamiliar vehicles, possibly 4 additional guests from church. Feels arranged. Then I got out. The hallway smelled like Ruth's lavender candles, a scent I used to find comforting and now connected with the feeling of waiting for something to go wrong. The dining table was set for 11. Good china, cloth napkins, the silverware Ruth only brought out when she wanted the occasion to feel weighted. I counted faces. Ruth at the head, Carolyn to her left, Marcus at the far end, eyes on his plate. 5 women from church, Patricia, and 4 others I recognized from the fellowship hall. 2 chairs open, one for me, one for someone I couldn't see. Tyler disappeared into the backyard with Buster. I wanted to call him back, but pulling your child away from a dog he loves because his mother has a bad feeling isn't a reason. It's a tell. I sat down. So glad you came, Sandra, Ruth said. Wouldn't miss it, I said. The lie sat in my mouth like a pill I hadn't swallowed. Dinner was polite the way hospital waiting rooms are polite. Everyone performing calm while something enormous builds behind the walls. Roast chicken, green beans, buttermilk biscuits. The conversation floated on the weather, a church fundraiser, Carolyn's new car. Nobody said David's name. Nobody said mine either unless they had to. The church women watched me eat. After the plates were cleared, Ruth folded her napkin, set it beside her glass, and looked around the table, making eye contact with each person in sequence, the way someone does when they've rehearsed a presentation, and they're checking that their slides are in order. My spine went rigid. She stood. She pressed both palms flat on the table, the gesture doctors use when they're about to deliver news that can't be taken back. I've been thinking about this for a long time, she said. I've spoken with everyone here privately. She looked around the table at each church woman, at Carolyn, at Marcus. They all knew. Every single one of them knew what was coming. Since David passed, things have been difficult. I think we all understand why. She looked at me. I'm not saying this to hurt you, Sandra, but for Tyler's well-being and for the family's peace, I think we should discuss whether it still makes sense for you to attend family events. The grandfather clock in the hallway ticked. 1 beat, 2. I'd like to put it to a vote. She gestured toward the church women. These ladies are here as witnesses, so everything is fair and transparent. Fair. She used that word like it belonged there. Like organizing a vote to exile your dead son's wife from the family while her child played in the yard was an act of fairness. I looked at Carolyn. Her jaw was set. I looked at Marcus. He was staring at a fixed point on the tablecloth approximately 6 inches in front of his plate, like a man who had already made a decision and was trying very hard not to watch himself make it. I looked at the church women. Patricia had her hands folded in her lap. The woman beside her was touching the cross at her throat. All in favor, Ruth said. Ruth's hand went up first. Slow, deliberate, the way you cast a vote you've been practicing. Marcus's hand shot up fast, almost relieved. The way you rip off something that's been stuck to you too long. Carolyn raised hers, eyes down. The church women followed, one by one, a wave of hands lifted on borrowed conviction. 8 hands, I counted them, because counting was the only thing my brain could do. 8 hands against me. And then the back door swung open. Tyler stood in the doorway, grass-stained knees, Buster panting at his side. He'd heard voices, not words, but the shape of them. Kids don't need language to read a room. They read the air. He saw the hands, all of them still raised, frozen in that ugly salute. His face moved from confusion to something worse. The particular look of a child who has just understood something they were too young to need to understand. He crossed the room to me, grabbed my sleeve, and said quietly, "Mommy, why are they doing this?" The hospital hallway hit me. That smell, antiseptic and helplessness. The smell from the night I learned David was gone. My vision narrowed. My throat locked. If I spoke, I would scream. If I screamed, Tyler would be terrified. If Tyler was terrified in that room, Ruth would file it under Sandra is unstable. I did the math in 2 heartbeats. I stood, I picked up my son, I said, "I won't fight you on this, Ruth. Not here, not in front of my son." And I walked out. The screen door snapped shut behind us. The grandfather clock struck 6. Nobody followed. I buckled Tyler into his car seat, drove 40 minutes north on Route 12 at exactly the speed limit, pulled into our driveway, and sat in the dark. Then, only then, I cried. Tyler reached forward from the back seat and held my hand. He didn't ask again. He just held on. The next 3 days moved like hospital time, slow when you watched it, gone when you looked away. I went to work. I came home. I made pasta from a box because I didn't have room in my brain for anything that required actual thought. I read Tyler chapter 14 of Stuart Little. I stared at the ceiling. My body made a decision about crying. Once was enough. On the 3rd day, I opened my phone notes and read through everything. 4 months of entries. Dates and quotes and incidents I'd documented the way I'd been trained to document patient changes. Ruth calling the school, Carolyn's unauthorized pickups, the church whisper campaign, the seat rearrangement, the vote, 8 hands, 4 churchwomen, premeditated. I read the whole record, start to finish. It took 12 minutes. When I finished, I saw what I hadn't been able to see while I was living inside it. Not grief, not miscommunication. A pattern, coordinated exclusion. Escalating, organized, designed to make me feel like the problem. 12 years of nursing. I know what a chart looks like when someone is declining and no one has changed the treatment plan. This chart said, intervention required. At work the next morning, Denise found me in the break room staring at my phone. "What are you going to do?" "I don't know yet," I said, "but I'm done smiling through it." She handed me a coffee. Good, the smiling was starting to worry me. The answer came 1 week later from the last place I expected. The inside pocket of David's winter work coat. I'd been avoiding his closet, the way you avoid the last pages of a book you don't want to end. I finally opened it on a Thursday evening. His steel-toed boots on the floor, one still tied. His canvas work coat on the hook, the heavy brown one he wore on site from November through March. I checked the outside pockets first. A hardware store receipt. A carpenter's pencil worn down to a stub. And in the inside breast pocket, a sealed envelope. My name on the front in David's handwriting. Block capitals. The way he wrote everything, like he was filling out a government form, even when he was writing something from the heart. It had never been mailed. No stamp, no postmark. I opened it. David had written it 19 months before he died, before a routine knee surgery. Low risk. He came through fine, forgot the letter existed, or left it for the moment I'd need it most. If you're reading this, something went wrong and I didn't make it back. I'm sorry, Sandy. You deserved better than this. The handwriting tightened toward the bottom, like he was rationing space. Take care of Tyler. He's got your stubbornness and my appetite, he'll be just fine. About my family, I love them, but I know who they are. Mom holds on too hard. Carolyn fights her own battles and aims them at whoever's nearby. And Marcus, watch Marcus. He borrowed money from me, a lot of it, and he's slippery when it comes to paying things back. The last line. If they ever try to make you choose between your dignity and their approval, choose your dignity. You earned that, Sandy, long before you ever met me. I read it 3 times. Then I sat down on the closet floor with my back against his boots and stared at the ceiling fan for a long time. He knew. He had always known what his family was capable of. For 6 years of marriage, he had been the wall between them and me, absorbing Ruth's opinions on the drive home, redirecting Carolyn's overreach with a phone call and a well-timed joke, managing Marcus quietly and without drama. When David died, the wall came down, and everything he'd been holding back came flooding through. I folded the letter carefully and put it in my own nightstand drawer. Not David's, mine. That night, after Tyler fell asleep, I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop. I searched Surviving Spouse Legal Rights Tennessee, Grandparent Visitation Rights Tennessee, Cease and Desist Letter, Family Harassment. I'm not a lawyer. I've never pretended to be. But I've spent 12 years reading clinical literature, interpreting test results, translating medical language into something frightened families can understand. Legal language wasn't that different. It just used longer sentences and billed by the hour. What I found, in Tennessee, the surviving parent holds sole legal custody. Grandparents can petition the court for visitation, but the standard is high. They must show that denying visitation would cause real harm to the child. Documented harassment by family members can support a petition for a civil protective order. I wrote down 3 questions and called the office of Rebecca Hartley at Hartley and Moore in Franklin the next morning. The receptionist asked what the matter concerned. Family law, I said. Specifically, how to draw a line without having to go to court. Rebecca took the appointment for that afternoon. Rebecca Hartley's office was on the 2nd floor of a brick building on Main Street. Law books in dark shelves along the walls. A framed diploma from Vanderbilt Law. A photo of 2 black labs on her desk, both mid-run. She was 53. Silver hair pulled back, reading glasses on a beaded chain. She listened without interrupting for 22 minutes while I laid it out. The seat change, the school call, Carolyn's pickups, the church campaign, the vote. I showed her my phone notes, 4 months of documented entries. She didn't look surprised. She looked familiar with it. Widows being pushed out, she said when I finished. More common than people want to admit. The husband dies and the family decides the wife was a conditional member all along. She pulled a legal pad toward her. Here's where you stand. You are Tyler's sole legal parent, full stop. Ruth has no legal authority over your child. In Tennessee, grandparents can petition for court-ordered visitation, but the court will heavily favor your judgment as the surviving parent, especially when there's a documented pattern of hostility toward you. She tapped my phone. This is that pattern, the vote, the school contact, the unauthorized pickups, coordinated, escalating, involving outside parties. What can I do that doesn't involve a courtroom? She set down her pen. We send a formal letter. It asserts your legal rights as Tyler's parent, documents the pattern, and notifies them that continued behavior could result in a petition for a protective order. It's not a lawsuit. It's a boundary on official letterhead. And the money Marcus owes David. Rebecca's eyebrows lifted a fraction. Tell me more about that. Rebecca told me to go through David's personal files. Tax records, bank statements, any labeled folder I could find. I went home and opened the filing cabinet in David's office. He kept his paperwork the way he ran job sites, labeled, organized, color-coded by year. Tax returns, pay stubs, the title to his truck. And behind everything else, a manila folder marked Marcus in David's block handwriting. Inside, a typed promissory note, $21,000, dated 26 months before David died. Marcus's signature at the bottom, slightly uneven, like the pen had hesitated before pressing down. Terms, monthly payments of $400, beginning in January. In the margin, in David's pencil, 12 consecutive months of zeros, not a single payment made. Stapled to the note, 2 printed text message screenshots. Marcus, I'll pay you back when the shop gets going. I swear. David, it's been 9 months, Marcus. Marcus, I know, don't tell Mom, please. Don't tell Mom. I sat on the office floor and ran that phrase through every conversation I'd had with Marcus since David died. Marcus asking if I'd gone through the files. Marcus voting yes. Marcus calling to suggest I apologize. Marcus standing at that table with his eyes fixed on the tablecloth. He didn't want me out because he cared about Tyler's well-being. He wanted me out because I was 20 minutes away from opening a filing cabinet and finding a debt he'd buried with his brother. Ruth wasn't the architect. Marcus was. He'd loaded the gun using Ruth's grief and let her pull the trigger. I brought everything to Rebecca the next day. The phone notes, the promissory note, the printed texts, David's letter not as legal evidence, but as context for who David was and what he understood about his own family. Rebecca spread it all across her desk and read in silence. When she finished, she took off her glasses. The promissory note is legally enforceable. Marcus owes David's estate $21,000 plus applicable interest. And as estate administrator, you are the one he owes it to. She picked up the note. This also reframes everything. Marcus's motive for pushing you out wasn't emotional, it was financial. That matters if any of them ever petition for visitation. It shows the campaign against you wasn't about Tyler. It was about Marcus protecting a secret. I don't want to destroy them, I said. I want them to stop. Rebecca nodded. That's exactly what this letter does. 3 things. 1, formally asserts your sole custodial authority. 2, documents the harassment and puts them on notice. 3, demands repayment of the $21,000 as a debt owed to the estate. I want to approve every word before it goes out. I wouldn't do it any other way. We spent 90 minutes on the draft. I changed 3 sentences, not because they were legally wrong, because they sounded angrier than I felt. I wanted the letter to sound like me, measured, clear, final. It went out on a Tuesday, certified mail, return receipt requested. While the letter was in transit, Ruth made her next move. She called Mercy Regional and asked to speak with my supervisor. She was transferred 3 times before someone in HR picked up. Ruth told them she had concerns about whether a recently widowed single mother was coping well enough to safely practice nursing. She didn't say unfit, she said concerned. Same meaning, built-in deniability. HR called me during my afternoon shift. A woman named Carol, professional, calm, reading from a checklist. We received a call from a Mrs. Ruth Briggs regarding your fitness to practice. We want you to know we found it to be without merit and have noted it accordingly. No action will be taken, but we're required to inform you. I thanked her, hung up, and stood in the break room feeling something colder than anger. Ruth had tried to take my job. The job that paid for Tyler's lunch account, our mortgage, his winter coat, his school field trips. The job I'd shown up to through David's death, through 4 months of family warfare, through every shift I ran on grief and 4 hours of sleep. She tried to take it with 1 phone call. I added the incident to my documentation. Date, time, name of HR rep. Then I went back to my patient. Denise found me an hour later. You look like you just got bad news. I told her. Her coffee cup stopped halfway to her mouth. She called your job. She's escalating because she thinks I'm not fighting back. Are you? I looked at her. I already did, she just doesn't know it yet. The next afternoon, Tyler's teacher, Ms. Nguyen, was waiting at the classroom door when I came for pickup. She pulled me gently to the side. Tyler's aunt came by this morning. She said she was on the pickup list and wanted to take him home early. My chest went hollow. What did you tell her? That she wasn't on our authorized list and couldn't take him without written permission from you. She was unhappy about it, but she left. I knelt and hugged Tyler. He smelled like glue sticks and playground air. Safe, normal. In the car, I called Carolyn. Even voice, nurse voice. The one I use with difficult family members, direct and without heat. Did you go to Tyler's school today? Her pitch rose immediately. I was just going to take him for a haircut. I thought it would be. Carolyn, you are not on his pickup list. You do not have my permission to take my son from school. Do not do that again. A pause, then flat. You don't belong here anymore, Sandra. We're trying to take care of Tyler. You're the one making this hard. I hung up. I didn't respond to belong. Responding meant explaining myself, and I was done explaining. I called the school and added a note to Tyler's file. Only Sandra Briggs may authorize pickups. No exceptions. I photographed the confirmation email from the office and texted Rebecca. She replied in 5 minutes. Noted. Letter goes out tomorrow. Wednesday evening, Tyler and I sat on the back porch with mason jars and lids we'd poked holes in. The fireflies were out early, a whole field of them blinking in slow, wandering patterns across the yard. Tyler caught 4, named them immediately. Flash, Biscuit, Peanut, and David. I felt the name hit somewhere behind my sternum. He looked up at me, serious brown eyes, David's eyes, and said, "Dad used to say fireflies were little nightlights for people who were scared of the dark." "He did say that," I said. "Are we scared of the dark, Mom?" I pulled him close. He leaned into my side, warm and grass-smelling and completely himself. "We were," I said, "but I think we found some light." I tucked him in at 8:30. Read chapter 15 of Stuart Little. He fell asleep before the chapter ended, one hand tucked under his chin. I sat on the edge of his bed and listened to him breathe. Then I went to the kitchen, opened the filing cabinet drawer, and looked at the promissory note. Marcus's signature, the column of zeros. My phone notes, 4 months, 41 entries, David's letter in my nightstand. 3 pieces of paper. A promise my husband wrote for me before he knew he'd need to. A debt his brother tried to bury. A record of every time his mother tried to erase me. I didn't go looking for this fight. It came to my front door. I was just organized enough to be ready for it. I went to the closet, took David's flannel shirt off the hanger, green and gray plaid, soft at the elbows, held it against my chest for a moment. Sawdust and cedar soap, the smell of being safe. Then I folded it and set it on the shelf. Not letting go, standing up, there's a difference. Thursday, Rebecca's office called at 2:20. Certified delivery confirmed. Ruth Briggs signed at 1:53 p.m. I was sitting in the hospital cafeteria eating a turkey sandwich. I set it down, took a breath. Somewhere in a white-sided farmhouse 40 minutes south of where I sat, Ruth was opening an envelope with Hartley and Moore, attorneys at law, Franklin, Tennessee, printed across the top. I knew Ruth. The first thing she would feel was offense. The second would be fear, because the letter named things she thought no one would ever put in writing. 6 minutes later, my phone rang. "Ruth." I let it go to voicemail. She called again. I let it ring. Third time I picked up. Her voice was tight as a wire. "What is this, Sandra? What have you done?" I stood up from the table. Denise looked at me from across the cafeteria, eyebrows raised. I gave her a small nod. "I set a boundary, Ruth, in writing." "A boundary? You sent a lawyer after your own family." "My attorney sent a letter documenting a pattern of behavior and outlining my legal rights. Every word of it is factual." Silence, heavy breathing. Then, "We're having a family meeting Saturday at the house, and I expect you there." "I'll be there," I said. She hung up. I looked at Denise, across the cafeteria. "Saturday," I said, "the farmhouse." She said, "You want me to come?" "No, this one's mine." I found out later what happened at the farmhouse that Thursday night. Ruth called Marcus first. He drove over within the hour. That alone told me everything. Marcus never rushed for anything unless he was afraid. Ruth slid the letter across the kitchen table. Marcus read his section. The color left his face. The letter named the promissory note. Amount, date, signature. It named Marcus as a creditor to the estate who had failed to make a single payment. It noted that Marcus's documented role in encouraging the exclusion campaign raised questions about whether the family's actions had been about Tyler's welfare or about protecting Marcus's secret. Marcus's hands shook. "She found the note," he said. Ruth stared at him. "You owed David $21,000. Her voice was flat in the way that means the situation is far past yelling. "You never told me." Marcus tried to bargain. "It was between me and David. He said he'd give me time." "You told me we needed to distance her from the family for Tyler's sake." Ruth's voice cracked on the last word. "Was any of that true?" Carolyn arrived 20 minutes later. Read her section. The unauthorized school pickup documented, the date, the school's written confirmation. She went pale. Ruth turned to Marcus, slowly. "You used me." Not fury, worse than fury. The voice of a woman who just realized her grief had been borrowed by someone else and aimed like a tool. "We'll handle this on Saturday," she said. "All of us." Marcus drove home 10 miles under the speed limit. Friday night, I sat at the kitchen table with everything in front of me: David's letter, the promissory note, my phone documentation, a printed copy of Rebecca's letter, which I'd reviewed word by word and approved. Denise stopped by after her shift, stood in my kitchen with decaf, looking at me the way I look at a patient before a difficult procedure. "You don't have to go tomorrow. The letter already did the work." "I know. So why are you going?" I straightened the edges of the papers in the folder. "Because someday Tyler is going to ask me what I did when his grandmother tried to vote me out of the family. And I want the answer to be, I walked back into that room and I set the terms myself." Denise nodded. "Okay, but if you need me in the driveway with the engine running." "I'll be fine." She left at 9. I laid out what I'd wear: a navy blouse, dark jeans, simple flats, nothing dramatic, nothing armored. I wasn't dressing for war. I was dressing for closure. Before bed, I read David's last line one more time, out loud, alone, in the quiet of the bedroom. "Choose your dignity. You earned that, Sandy, long before you met me." I said it in my own voice, and I heard his underneath it. Then I put the letter back in the drawer and went to sleep. Saturday morning, I called Mrs. Patterson from 2 houses down to stay with Tyler. He didn't need to see this part. I drove Route 12 south with the windows down. June in Middle Tennessee, warm asphalt, honeysuckle, cut grass baking in the early sun. I passed the elementary school, the diner on Elm where David proposed in the corner booth over bad coffee and a ring he'd carried in his jacket pocket for 3 weeks. The look on his face when I said yes. Like he'd been holding his breath since the day we met. I passed the turnoff for the hardware store David's father used to run, turned onto the gravel road. 3 cars in the driveway. Ruth's sedan, Marcus's truck, Carolyn's SUV. No church witnesses. No Bible study guests, no audience. Just family, whatever we were now. I sat in the car for 60 seconds, breathed, touched the folder on the passenger seat. 3 things inside: my rights, their record, their debt. It weighed less than a pound. It was the heaviest thing I'd ever carried. I got out, walked up the porch steps. The screen door was propped open. The grandfather clock was ticking in the hallway, steady and unbothered, like it had all the time in the world. I counted the chimes as I stepped inside. 10. 10 o'clock on a Saturday, and I was about to do the hardest thing I'd done since I said goodbye to David. Ruth, Carolyn, and Marcus sat at the dining room table. Same chairs, same arrangement as the night of the vote, except this time the letter sat on the table instead of 8 raised hands. Ruth spoke first. "Sit down, Sandra." I didn't sit. I stood at the end of the table, my old spot, the one they'd moved me from months ago. I set the folder down in front of me without opening it. Ruth lifted the letter. "Explain this." "There's nothing to explain. You received a letter from my attorney documenting a pattern of behavior and asserting my legal rights as Tyler's sole custodial parent. Every word of it is accurate and sourced." "Harassment," her chin lifted. "I'm his grandmother, I have a right." "You have a right to petition the court for visitation. The court will then consider the documented pattern, the school contact, the unauthorized pickups, the campaign through church members, the employment complaint, the organized vote to exclude me in front of 4 witnesses. In Tennessee, the surviving parent's judgment carries significant legal weight." I kept my voice at the register I use for discharge instructions. Calm, even practiced. Ruth's grip tightened on the letter. The paper creased. "You can't keep him from us." "I'm not keeping him from anyone. I'm establishing terms. Scheduled visits with advance notice. No unauthorized contact with his school or my employer. No disparaging remarks about me in Tyler's presence. No unannounced pickups." I paused. "These aren't punishments. They're what normal families call basic respect." The clock ticked. Marcus hadn't spoken. His knees were moving under the table, a restless, anxious bounce he couldn't seem to stop. His eyes moved between Ruth and the letter like a man watching two cars approach the same intersection. Ruth turned to him. "Marcus, stand up." He didn't move. "Stand up." He stood, slowly, like the chair had gotten heavier. "Is it true about the money?" I opened the folder, removed the copy of the promissory note, laid it flat on the table between them. David's handwriting at the top, Marcus's signature at the bottom. David lent Marcus $21,000, $20 6 months before he died, for the auto shop that closed 8 months later. Marcus signed a repayment agreement, $400 a month. I pointed to the margin. David tracked it in pencil, 12 months. Every line is a zero, not one payment made. Marcus's throat worked. That was between me and David. David is gone. That makes it between you and his estate. I am the estate administrator. Ruth picked up the note. Read the terms. Trace the zeros with one finger. Read Marcus's signature. Her hand trembled not from weakness, from the kind of anger that originates in the bones. "You told me she was the problem," she said to Marcus, very quietly. "Mom, you said we needed to protect Tyler from her, that she was unstable, that she didn't understand how this family worked." Marcus's mouth opened, closed, opened again. "You sat at this table and voted to ban her from this family." Ruth's voice fractured on the last word, not with sorrow for what she'd done to me, with the humiliation of realizing she'd been a tool in someone else's calculation. "Because you owed her dead husband money." The room went quiet, the specific quiet of something finally being named. Carolyn, who had been sitting with her arms folded, leaned forward. Her voice was smaller than I'd ever heard it. "Marcus, did you tell Mom to do the vote?" "I didn't tell her to do it." He looked at the floor. "I just said it might be easier if Sandra wasn't around as much." The room understood the distinction and rejected it. Carolyn turned to me. The armor she usually wore had slipped a few inches. "The school thing. I was only going to take him for a haircut. I wasn't trying to." "Carolyn," I kept my voice quiet, "you went to my son's school and attempted to take him without my knowledge or permission. You're not on his authorized list. The school documented it and reported it to me." Her eyes filled. "I miss him," she said. "I miss David, and Tyler he's all I have left of." She stopped, heard her own words trap her. She pressed her lips together hard. "Tyler is a 7-year-old boy," I said. "He's not a replacement for your grief. He's my son. If you want to be part of his life, I am open to that, but on terms that keep him safe and keep his mother treated with basic respect." She tried once more, out of habit more than belief. "You don't really belong here, Sandra." I met her eyes. "I don't need to belong here. I just need to protect the person who does." Carolyn sat back and put her face in her hands. Marcus stood behind his chair, gripping it, staring at the promissory note like it was a photograph of himself. "Two down." Ruth hadn't moved. She was standing at the head of the table exactly where she had stood on the night she raised her hand and asked the room to erase me. The letter in front of her, the promissory note beside it. The room was quiet the way a hospital room gets quiet after a monitor flatlines and everyone knows, but nobody moves. "You think a piece of paper from a lawyer changes anything," she said. "You think I'll just step aside and let you take my grandson." "I'm not taking him anywhere. I'm setting the terms of his relationship with this family. There's a difference." Craig would never have wanted this. I had been waiting for that. I knew she would use David. I had decided weeks ago what I would say. "David wrote me a letter," I said. "Before he died, he told me to choose my dignity over your approval. Those were his exact words." Ruth flinched. "He wouldn't say that about his own mother." "He loved you," I said, "and he knew you. Both of those things were true at the same time." Her voice climbed. "You're taking him away from me. You're taking the last piece of my son." "I'm not taking anything." I kept my voice at the same register, even, unhurried. "My son asked me the night of the vote, 'Mommy, why are they doing this?' I didn't have an answer for him then." I looked at her. "The answer is that no one ever told you no." Ruth opened her mouth. closed it. You called this a family matter, Ruth. I picked up the folder. You were right, and as the only parent Tyler has left, I've handled it. I looked at each of them. Marcus, Carolyn, Ruth. Nobody spoke. The grandfather clock ticked steadily behind me, measuring time that no longer belonged to them. Here's how this works going forward. If you want to see Tyler, you contact me. Not his school, not the church, not my coworkers, me. We arrange a visit in advance. You arrive when you say you will. You treat his mother with basic respect. That's the floor, not the ceiling. I paused. If you can do that, Tyler will know his grandmother, his aunt, his uncle. He'll run in this yard. He'll eat at this table. He'll grow up knowing his father's family. Another pause. If you can't, then the next call from Rebecca Hartley's office won't be a letter. It'll be a petition. I walked to the door. The screen creaked open. Summer air came through, warm, green, the smell of honeysuckle and real life continuing without permission. I stopped with one hand on the frame. I didn't come here to fight, I said. I came to say goodbye to the version of this family that thought they could vote me out. The screen door closed behind me. I walked to my car, drove 40 minutes north, windows down, same road I'd taken to David's funeral, to Ruth's dinners, to the vote, to this. Same road, same trees, same sky. Different woman. I pulled into my driveway, turned off the engine, and sat in the silence for exactly 1 minute. Then I went inside to get my son. The first week after was silence. No calls, no texts, no church gossip, no cars in the driveway. The absence was louder than anything Ruth had ever said out loud. I went to work, made dinner, read Stuart Little. We were on chapter 18, and Tyler kept asking if the ending was sad, and I kept saying, let's find out together, because that was the only honest answer I had for most things. Marcus called 2 weeks after Saturday. His voice had lost all its swagger, stripped down, flat, like a jacket he'd borrowed and finally returned. I can start paying back $350 a month. Would that be acceptable? Put it in writing and send it to my attorney. He did. Rebecca confirmed the repayment agreement the following week. First payment came on the 1st of August. $350, direct deposit, memo line, estate repayment. Carolyn texted 3 weeks later. I stared at the notification for a full minute before opening it. Can I take Tyler for ice cream on Saturday? I'll pick him up at noon and have him back by 2 if that works. First time in months, she'd asked instead of assumed. I wrote back, that works. Text me when you arrive. She did. She had him home by 1:55. Ruth took longer. 6 weeks of silence. Then a handwritten note appeared in my mailbox, hand-delivered, no stamp, which meant she'd driven 40 minutes each way without knocking. The note read, I was wrong about the vote. I've known that for a while. I don't know how to undo it, but I would like to try. It wasn't a full apology. Ruth's pride and grief were still too tangled for that, but it was a crack, a hairline fracture in something that had been solid for 6 years. I waited 1 week to respond, not to punish her, because I needed to mean what I said. Thank you for writing that. Let's start small. Coffee at the diner on Main, just the 2 of us. She said yes. The coffee was awkward. The conversation was careful. She didn't apologize again. I didn't push. We sat across from each other and talked about Tyler's swim lessons and whether Ruth's garden tomatoes would survive the August heat. Small things, true things. It was nothing. It was something. It was a beginning. At church the following Sunday, Patricia approached me near the parking lot. I should have asked you directly what was happening, she said, instead of assuming. Yes, I said, you should have. She nodded. She left. That was enough. That week, Tyler drew a new family picture in crayons on construction paper and taped it to the refrigerator at his own eye level. Me in the center, tall brown hair holding what he labeled nurse bag, David on a cloud above us, smiling, wearing a hard hat, one hand raised in a wave. Grandma Ruth off to the right, smaller with Buster beside her. She was there. He hadn't erased her. He'd just put her in the right place. Family isn't a vote. It's not a show of hands at someone else's table. It's not a position you can be removed from by people who are grieving so hard they've confused their pain with authority. Family is what you build when you stop asking for permission to exist. That's my story. One vote, one letter, one little boy who taught me that the people who truly matter don't raise their hands against you. They hold yours. Have you ever had to fight for your place in a family that was supposed to love you? Drop your story in the comments. I read every single one. And if this reminded you to hold your ground, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Subscribe to Hidden Karma Stories so you never miss what comes next.